Hey everyone, John Blanket's here, and welcome to another Big Q University Knowledge Nugget. In this edition, we're going to explore the cost of quality, moving from little q to big Q quality. I hope you find this knowledge nugget insightful and informative. Up to this point in this series, we've discussed what I refer to as the tenets of big Q quality transformation, that universal paradigm, big Q quality, the universal truth. Every system's perfectly designed to give you exactly what you're getting today. The universal processes, quality planning, quality control, and quality improvement. The universal approach, the systemic process-based quality management approach, and the universal framework that was made up of the 7 quality management principles. Now it's time for us to discuss another tenet of transformation that I call the universal value proposition, or the cost of quality. And that proposition says that big Q quality pays, little q quality costs. In our previous Knowledge Nugget edition, we discussed one of the 3 big Q quality management universal processes called quality planning. And during that discussion, we introduced a predictive and preventive quality planning approach called advanced product quality planning. Now, unfortunately, in industries today, there are still organizations and individual leaders that believe that this big Q quality management approach to quality planning costs too much money. So let's take a look at how this big Q quality planning approach actually pays the organization and doesn't cost the organization. To do this, let's take a look at a notional depiction of the cost of design changes of a product going through its normal product life cycle. So first, we're going to take a look at the little q quality planning approach that is referred to as the serial approach. We have 3 phases of product life cycle. We have the product design and development phase between preliminary design review and critical design review. We then have the initial production phase. Then we have the full rate production phase and post-delivery support. This dashed line represents the expected number of design changes that will occur through these 3 phases in this little q quality planning serial approach. And you can see that in the first phase of product design and development, here's the level of design changes we would expect. And the reason why we call it serial is because we now lob it over to manufacturing, and we expect them to design the processes that will produce this design. And this is the number of design changes that we expect to occur in this approach. And the reason for these changes typically are we discover performance issues and we have producibility issues. We have nonconformities, we may have throughput issues, safety issues, and potential customer quality escape issues. Then you can see as we move into full rate production and post-delivery support, this level of expected engineering design changes. Now, what does this cost the organization? Typically, this is what the cost curve looks like, all right? It costs the least amount to make design changes when I'm still in the design and development phase. Then you can see exponentially the cost starts to rise in the initial production phase. And when I get into full rate production and post-delivery support, this is where the design changes cost the organization the most amount of money. Now, what does a big Q quality planning approach do for us? Well, it flips this. And you can see by the dotted line that notionally in a big Q quality planning approach, which we would call the integrated product and process development approach, where we are concurrently developing product and process, we would expect the most design changes in the design and development phase. Then as we move into manufacturing, because we have concurrently developed product and process, we would have a much lower level of expected engineering design changes. Then as we move into full rate production and post-delivery support, we would expect those design changes to drop off. So as you can see, a big Q quality planning approach pays the organization. A little q quality management planning approach costs the organization. So let's take a look at this universal value proposition, the cost of quality, from a different perspective. Let's take a look at it operationally within an organization. As an organization transforms their culture from little q quality to big Q quality. And to do this, I'm going to use the traditional categories of the cost of quality, which are the cost of conformance, made up of preventive costs and appraisal costs, and the cost of nonconformance, made up of external nonconformance costs and internal nonconformance costs. So let's take a look at what these costs look like as I evolve, as I transform from little q quality in phase 1 here to big Q quality in phase 5. So in phase 1, very little q quality, all I have is final inspection. So that is appraisal, and I really believe I can inspect quality into my product or service. And as a result, I deal with a lot of nonconformance costs, external nonconformance costs, escapes going to the customer, and internal nonconformance costs within my organization. As I move to phase 2, I start to shift some of that final inspection into in-process inspection. So I do more inspecting, and as a result, I have an impact. I decrease the total cost of nonconformance. I'm decreasing what is escaping going to the customer as external nonconformances, but you can see that internal nonconformances has risen because now I'm containing or catching some of the nonconformities before they get to the customer. In addition, I'm kicking in some root cause and corrective action methodologies that are also helping me learn to understand how to prevent recurrences that have an impact on the total cost of nonconformances. Now, when I move into the next phase of transformation, I'm still increasing appraisal activity. Maybe now I'm adding in product and process auditing. But I'm also starting to learn about this thing called preventive big Q quality. And so I'm starting to dial in advanced quality planning techniques. I'm doing more preventive maintenance. I'm training operators and personnel prior to the release of processes into operations, and I'm having an impact. I've lowered the cost of nonconformity again. And you can see that external nonconformities as well as internal nonconformities are now coming down. Up to this point, I've been very reactive in my approach to quality, and this is the zone of little q quality. And this is where little q quality costs the organization. And you can see where it costs the organization. But I'm about to enter what I call the preventive threshold. And this preventive threshold is going to move me from little q quality being reactive into big Q quality being predictive and preventive. So as I continue to transform in the organization, I punch through that preventive threshold and I move into an area of predictive and preventive quality. Now, how do I know as an organization that I've crossed over this preventive threshold? Well, the first thing is that the amount of preventive activities and costs are now for the first time greater than the amount of appraisal activities and costs. I also know that I've crossed over because the cost of conformance for the first time is now greater than the cost of nonconformance. This is where the organization starts to realize that big Q quality pays and little q quality costs. Then as I move to phase 5, I reduce my appraisal to an appropriate level, and I slightly increase my preventive activities to an expected level. And I do that to get an expected performance in quality relative to nonconformities. I have very little to none external nonconformity, and I have an expected level of internal nonconformity within the organization. Now, as we move past phase 5, you would expect to see this preventive category of cost start to come down as I start to realize effectiveness and efficiency learning opportunities. And we'll start to level out in an area that we call the optimization point of the cost of quality. So I want us to truly get a sense of the magnitude that a big Q quality cultural transformation can have on the cost of quality. And I'm going to do this by stacking the categories of the cost of quality on top of themselves. I'm going to stack the cost of nonconformance on top of the cost of conformance. And I'm going to create an area under the curve chart. This is what it's going to look like. This line represents the total cost of quality, and on any given point on this line, you can look down and you can see the cost of external nonconformances, the cost of internal nonconformances, and the cost of conformity, be it preventive or appraisal. Now, as I move through phase 1, 2, and into mid 3, I'm into what I call the zone of pain. This is where little q quality costs the organization. And you can see why I call it the zone of pain, because in reality, the total cost of quality goes up in the organization. This is what I call the moment of truth for leadership. Leadership has got to decide if I continue to punch through this, digging myself out of the hole that I put myself into by the little q quality approach. If I'm truly transformed, if I've changed my prevailing belief system to be big Q and I trust it, then I'm going to punch through this moment of truth. And this is what the total cost of quality curve looks like. I make my way through the preventive threshold. I'm entering into what I call the zone of reward. This is where big Q quality pays the organization. I know that I'm in the preventive and predictive side because my preventive costs are now greater than my appraisal costs, and my cost of conformity is now greater than my cost of nonconformity. And you can see as we make it through phase 5 and we start to level out, we make it to this point of optimization, this zone of optimization. So when I reach this zone of optimization, look where I am on the cost axis compared to where I was when I started. This is the potential magnitude that big Q quality can have on an organization. This is why we say that big Q quality pays the organization and little q quality costs the organization. Okay, let's close this Knowledge Nugget edition by recapping this tenet of transformation we call the universal value proposition. Big Q quality pays, little q quality costs. We took a look at the notional depiction of the cost of quality as an organization transforms from little q quality to big Q quality. We talked about how that organization must transform from a little q reactive approach to quality to a big Q predictive and preventive approach to quality. We're going to do this by increasing big Q preventive activities, which will increase the cost of conformance in an organization. But that will result in a drastic decrease in the cost of nonconformances in an organization that will more than offset the increases in the cost of conformity in the organization. We also know that this is going to have an impact on customer satisfaction improvements. It's going to improve on-time delivery, and it's going to improve organizational profitability. So always remember, big Q quality pays, little q quality costs. Well, that's going to be a wrap for this Big QU Knowledge Nugget edition. I hope this edition piqued your interest and intellectual curiosity. Don't hesitate to leave feedback or comments regarding this Knowledge Nugget content. And if you haven't already done so, please consider following the Big Q University Knowledge Sharing Series. I hope you plan to join me for the next Big Q University Knowledge Nugget. But until then, remember, every day is a great day to make things better. See you next time.